La diffusion vient de démarrer. Tous les participants sont en mode écoute seul.
All right, thank you for everybody to be here and welcome to this exciting day that is the official launch of the Canadian Practice Manual for BIM. Bonjour à tous et merci d'être là pour le lancement officiel du manuel de pratique canadien pour la MDB. Juste pour une note pour nos auditeurs en français, la présentation se passe en anglais. Si vous avez des questions en français, s'il vous plaît, n'hésitez pas et on les posera. That was just a note to our Francophone viewers that the presentation will be in English, and if there's any questions in French, to not hesitate. The objective today is to present the practice manual, and we have the people who led the actual practice manual discuss it in depth. But first, we wanted to take the opportunity to present Building Smart International and Building Smart Canada and present a bit the mission and what we're trying to achieve. Quick history lesson, Building Smart International was developed in 1995 as the International Alliance for Interoperability. The objective was really to enable software interoperability in the AEC FM industry. It was later rebranded in 2008 to Building Smart to improve communication, productivity, delivery, time, cost, and quality throughout the whole building life cycle. So that's the current mission today of Building Smart. The idea is to sustain collaborative and interoperable practices across the asset life cycle. So through the design, through the procurement, through assembly, and through operations. This is where the logo comes from. Building Smart Canada is one of many international chapters. And so the strength of Building Smart, of course, lies in its international reach and in the fact that it is an international network of excellence and like-minded individuals who are working towards interoperable standards for the built environment. A bit about Building Smart Canada. It was established in 2011 and it was initiated and run by the Institute for BIM in Canada. The idea is to provide the appropriate body and home for Canadian BIM standards development. The idea is to participate at the international level in the development of standards and to actually give a Canadian voice to those standards, and of course to bring these standards back to Canada and ensure that they are used and diffused. The Institute for BIM in Canada was established in 2010. It is a joint national committee. Its strength lies in the fact that it is this joint national committee that is made up of these professional associations, namely the CCA, CSC, RAIC, the Association of Consulting Engineering, National Defence, and Defence Construction Canada. The objectives, of course, is to define collaborative approaches to the built environment, to develop and recommend consistent terminology and best practices, and of course to endorse and develop open BIM standards. There is a strong education component. How we're organized, so it's important to understand that IBC is a steering committee for Building Smart Canada, so we are tightly combined and we get our direction from the joint national committee, so the associations. Our organization is developed across different committees that ensure the daily operations and the project development, such as the Canadian Practice Manual for BIM. Our strength, of course, relies on its members community, and I'll take the opportunity here to invite you to become a member. It's free to join and to participate in Building Smart Canada activities. One of the key elements that around which Building Smart Canada is articulating its practices is around the Canadian the roadmap to lifecycle BIM in the Canadian AECO community, which was launched in January 2015. It is a call to action for all members and all stakeholders of the Canadian AECO community to get involved and to initiate and to help the transition towards digital and building information modeling based practices. The roadmap is developed across 6 streams, which are all aimed at achieving a goal of a consistent use of BIM across Canada. A couple of documents that are have been developed over the past years: the IBC Contract Appendix for BIM projects, which is available on the IBC website. The Benefits of BIM for Owners Report, which was done a while back but still relevant. The IBC BIM Project Execution Planning Toolkits. And apologies, of course, the Canadian Practice Manual for BIM, which is why we're here today. So without further ado, I'm presenting our two presenters, so John K. Dickinson and Paul Woodard, who were the people who literally herded the cats over the past couple of years to get the practice manual up and running, get the funding, and of course, get it out. So without further ado, Paul, I will hand it over to you, and I'll let you take it away.
Alrighty, thank you very much, Eric. My name is Paul Woodard. I'll be introducing my partner John Dickinson a little bit later. Today, I'm going to assume that if you're here, most of people will understand what BIM is. So this is not going to be a BIM 101 presentation. This is going to be about the practice manual. I've got a lot of material to get through, so I'm going to try to be reasonably quick. Just to give you a bit of an idea of what the flow is going to be, going to give you a little bit of the context of why a Canadian practice manual for BIM, how it all came together, give an overview of the 3-volume document, and finally, the part that I suspect most of you are here for is understanding how to actually obtain it and get it and start using it. So, I am having some issues with, there we go, okay. Looks like it's just there's a bit of a lag in terms of forwarding things. So the context of the practice manual. Eric started off and he gave the overview of the roadmap to lifecycle BIM. For those of you who are not familiar with this, I encourage you to go to the Building Smart website and have a look through it, understand what are all the puzzle pieces for what's going to take us from sort of a Canada where it was in 2014 of not using digital information to Canada of 2020 and beyond, where we're going to be having a lot of use of integrated digital information in the asset, in the built environment. But 3 elements that really stand out are about guidelines and standardized languages and understanding. This really gets to sort of the idea, if you look at what Building Smart Canada stands for, looking at how you actually want to use BIM, how you want to use information, it really comes down to 3 issues. Businesses need contracts. Construction projects are all based around contractual relationships, and we need contracts that understand BIM and can work with them. Projects need to be able to do proper planning. Nobody gets together and just starts raising a barn. You need to actually, have the planning tools necessary to be able to do all this. And the people who work on those projects need to be able to understand what they're doing. They need to communicate with each other, and they need guidelines and manuals so they can have shared understanding. They can have expectations about not only how to do BIM, but how to best do it and how to be able to use things collaboratively. So the idea was these are things that are needed. And so there were separate projects within IBC and Building Smart Canada to create the contract language, to create the toolkits to show how to put together plans. And this today's presentation talks about the shared understanding, the BIM guide or the manual. When this was first being discussed, it was a couple of guiding principles and goals were set out. The first one was to try to, thank you, to say what is BIM as it's actually done, not a theoretical, best case, purely academic BIM, but how is it actually going to work in Canada? How is it going to be something practical for Canadian practitioners to incorporate these best practices, to not just be a tool for architects or not just be a tool for the contractors, but to really be something that can be shared amongst the entire AECOO ecosystem, and also to be aligned with international best practices. So the goal was to create a practical Canadian resource for BIM adoption in businesses and in projects. And this would be something that be used to help support and build on the other BSC roadmap activities. A few guiding principles that were along there when building it was that it had to be Canadian, it had to be multidisciplinary, and it had to be something that would actually work with people. Now, some people will say, how does this compare and contrast to some of the other resources that we know are out there? There we go. Tools that people may be familiar with are the InBIM US guide, the AEC CanBIM protocol, and the GSA Government Services Administration series from the US. Just a couple of comments on each of those. The InBIMs contains a lot of the information and the standards developed through Penn State. It is a very useful guide, it's a very useful material, but it can be somewhat academic and it's very hard to apply without lots of other BIM knowledge. It is not a tool or a system that you want to just jump into without a whole lot of familiarity and background. The AEC is a very, very good guideline tool. It is, however, focused on design and is focused on the early design process and not the full life cycle. GSA, it is sort of focused on the back end. It is very owner-centric. It is also not completely out there. Many pieces of it are still in draft form. Together, none of these tools really meet Canada's needs. And the whole purpose behind this was to be a Canadian guideline and a Canadian resource. So getting back to how the whole practice manual was created and put together, first off, the idea was to get a wide range of people contributing to this, from not just architects, not just constructors, but to have contributions from architects, engineers, constructors, owners, consultants, everybody who is part of the construction cycle and information value chain. So the first step was to solicit chapter leads, people who would do this. I actually should back up a little bit. There was a preliminary outline that was put together several years ago by a technical committee to say that these are the materials that we think a practice manual should cover for Canada. We then solicited chapter leads on an invitation basis based on known engagement and expertise, people who already have a reputation throughout the Canadian industry for being sort of the go-to people for BIM. As a group, they reviewed these outlines, worked to revise them, helped manage the over 60 volunteers from across Canada who came together to contribute knowledge, expertise, reviewing, providing examples, things like that. They led this the chapter leads led this process of gathering material, gathering content, helping to review it, helping to edit it, helping to bring it all together. It was finally assembled into volumes where it went through another editorial review cycle, again led through by the chapter leads and the broader contributors. Finally, it went through the publication process, which involved translation, graphic layout, everything that you need to turn it into a full manual, which brings us to the official release now in both languages, September 2017. Trying to give you all of this just so that you understand that this wasn't something that was built together by a committee in a smoky back room to say this is how you should do it, that this was actually built from a framework and is a Canadian-wide reference built by the people who are actually doing BIM in Canada. I do want to specifically highlight and thank the various chapter leads, and the organizations that they work for who were willing to contribute their employees' time to help take on a very, very challenging task of helping to bring this all together. I just want to thank all these people. I'm not going to read out names, but just thank you all for your contributions again. We really, really appreciate it. Okay. This is going to be the bulk of the presentations. Try to give you an overview of what is in the 3 volumes. The practice manual is broken down into 3 volumes, each volume really focusing on a particular aspect that's important. Volume 1 is called BIM, a primer. This is material that you might actually find in sort of a BIM 101 presentation, and it's to try to provide sort of a common understanding for people who are familiar with the design and construction process, but who may not be familiar with BIM, as a short, approachable introduction to BIM, so they can start to get some of the same terminology, same understanding of what BIM is, why it might be used, and why this is important. Volume 2 is really looking at BIM at a company level. If you are starting to bring in some of this digital information and digital technology into your organization, what are some of the business implications? What are some of the challenges you'd expect to face? How would you want to go about doing this? And then Volume 3 starts to look at BIM in the context of a construction project. How do you start using digital information collaboratively? How do you start understanding and creating sort of a shared understanding of what are the workflows going to be like? How are information going to be exchanged? How are things going to be used? At this point, I'm going to hand things over to John Dickinson, who is going to go over and give you a bit of an introduction to Volume 1 and Volume 2. So John, I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you very much, Paul. Looks like I even have control of the desktop, which is handy. Actually, I want to really thank Paul for putting together so nice a concise presentation of what we've been through pulling this together for the last few years. It was never any small undertaking, and it's really important that you understand just how much emphasis was put on this by real practitioners in the industry. Oops, press the right button. Hopefully it will move. There we go. So Volume 1, as Paul pointed out, is really, well, it's called a primer for a reason. It's going to present BIM in a non-technical terms, and it's going to address some very specific questions that seem to be at the top of mind of anybody who's just beginning to approach BIM. What is BIM? Why use BIM? Who benefits from it? Where is it being used? How to engage in BIM projects, and what's next? And though for many of you who are on this call, that probably doesn't matter quite as much, what is important is you're not the only one doing it. And you need to be able to provide that context to everybody else that you're working with. And in that sense, this provides a very good kickoff or a basic introduction for those people so that you're not repeating the thing time and time again, and you can give them a resource that they can rely on. So its purpose is to essentially provide a very concise, digestible, big picture introduction. And that introduction is going to cover stakeholders, objectives, and life cycle scope. Is going to provide a collection of terminology, not everything, it's not exhaustive collection of terminology, but a fundamental collection of terminology that every BIM practitioner really should be somewhat familiar with. And then it's going to close with some suggested current or first steps so that people can go forward in some sort of measurable fashion. And in short, it identifies, it recommends that you identify your current capabilities, come up with your future goals, and then build a plan to bridge the two states together. The underlying message of Volume 1 is very much that BIM is not a fad. It is not just a technology. It is not just for architects. It is not just something that you can take off the shelf. It's not one size fits all. And it's not only for design and construction. Instead, it points out that BIM is a process and a technology and a mindset combined, that it's already being used in around the world for well over a decade and requires a planned deployment, not just ad hoc implementation. and that it is for everyone involved in the built environment over the life cycle. So you have to remember, of course, that when we're talking about life cycle, the things we build have no care whatsoever about where one budget ends and another begins. And that is part of what the BIM attempts to bridge, to create a link between those two domains. This volume also shows BIM is about supporting an already emerging transformation of the industry. It's about connecting stakeholders together, how BIM actually does that. That we have many stakeholders involved from beginning to end of the life cycle of a building or horizontal infrastructure. We have the designers, the builders, the users, the operators. The first two are always the ones that people immediately think of. But the users, the operators, and especially the owners are incredibly important in this equation. It also gets into bridging the disciplines. We're capturing and reusing or leveraging information so that we're not doing it again from first principles. We're not having to go out there and examine conditions. We have something on hand. We can make far more effective, far more efficient decisions based on far more accurate information. It bridges the discipline barriers. It deals with the fact that we have projects that are for design and construction spread over months and years, and it covers the decades of occupancy, use, and operations. We're really looking here to see BIM used in a collaborative and integrated fashion to yield a productive and efficient construction sector. Volume 2 is about implementing BIM in your firm. That's its focus, that's its scope. And the contributors that put their effort into this practice manual had an awful lot to say. And so the table of contents that you see in the slide here is very abbreviated version about setting vision and objectives, going all the way through to operational transitions, and then even summarizing some common challenges that many implementers have come across in the past and have had some luck in mitigating or overcoming. So the purpose of this volume is really to provide insight on maximizing benefits and minimizing the pain when integrating BIM into your firm's operations. Basically, we are looking here to avoid we're looking for new benefits and not just new overhead. And often that has been found that if it's not being done, if it's not being planned out properly, if it's implemented in an ad hoc fashion, you incur overhead for new processes, new technologies, new efforts, without really receiving or getting the benefits that you're looking for. So the underlying message in this volume is that preparation is key. Preparation will lead to the largest benefits and least disruption. Basically, if you're going to increase the use of BIM in your organization or adopt BIM into your organization, it's going to mean that there's going to be changes. And those changes are going to require new skill sets, new processes, practices, and deliverables, new tools. You're going to be facing new risks and obligations, and you're going to have new information management needs. If BIM is any one thing, if you try and put it in a little container, it's information, building information modeling. And so that information has to be treated like a very valuable resource. This volume is really much focused on how, or well, the reason the manual exists is to guide you through these changes and give you a constructive way to face these new realities. Now, to illustrate what's actually in volume 2, in one of the sections here, I'm picking on section 3.2, which is training, mentoring, and support. And the underlying message here is that the section is saying that education is actually a shared resource. It has to be inclusive. And there's a number of reasons for this. It's not just for the technical people. It's everybody in your organization that's coming into contact with BIM. Everyone who's making decisions about BIM. Because if you do not have everybody on board, if people do not see the value in it, it's just another management fad and is going to flounder. You actually have to get everybody up to speed as to why this is important, what you're trying to achieve, and then you can actually hope to make some way. What we have then, or what it boils it down to, is into some training goals. You need some general training. The focus is on building the understanding amongst everybody of the importance, the impact on the business, and foster buy-in. And then you've got to have some specific training, which focuses down in a very pragmatic fashion, targeted to the role, the task, and the activity. And it has to be timely. You can't just roll it out way in advance and then expect people to remember what they've learned or how they're supposed to be using the processes and the tools 6 or 7 months later when you finally actually get that pilot up and running. You need to put the two together. Mentors, it focuses in as well. And it says that mentors can play a very important role in terms of rolling out BIM. And there are 3 sorts of major areas that you need to consider. Who will be your mentors? What will your mentors be doing? And what aspects what sort of things are important about mentors? They're going to be providing guidance and support, but they also need to be in close proximity to the others that they're mentoring. Just having a mentor on another end of the continent, at the other end of the phone line, who's available only on certain hours every week, is not quite the same as having somebody looking over your shoulder, recognizing what you're doing, and being able to guide you. And yes, you can do it this way, but if you do it that way, you get these benefits, and this is better. It talks a bit about what mentors can also provide in terms of rolling out BIM within the company. You can monitor, they're capable of monitoring the progress. And if things go sour, and they're already experts in BIM, they are your last resort in terms of somebody you can pull in to help pull a project back in line with times, because most people are not going to be rolling out BIM without actually a project underway. And there's going to be hiccups somewhere along the line. So what this is all about here is that there is a sort of theme of incremental rolled out implementation. What we want to see is things like starting with one project, one team, one department. You want to learn from, refine, reapply, and later spread it throughout the company. Hence, training and rollout is not a one-off effort. It is something that you're going to be coming back to time and time again as you progressively implement BIM through your firm. At this point in time, I'll hand it back to Paul, who will finish off.
Alrighty. All right. So that is volume 1 and 2. Volume 3 really looks at the use of BIM in the context of a construction project. With the idea being that information is expected to be generated, used over time, and probably handed between multiple stakeholders, multiple participants. So the scope of the document is really about preparing and participating in a BIM-enabled project. The key sections of this volume really work through looking at what are the objectives of the project and how do you translate those objectives into what you're going to be doing with BIM, and also how do you map that against the capabilities of your team? Do you have the right people to actually do the things you want to do? How do you prioritize the information that you plan on generating and using? What are going to be the roles and responsibilities of people within the team? It goes through an entire section on illustrative workflows. Every project and every organization has different ways that they do things, how they generate and consume information. What these workflows are a good starting point for people to look at. Typically, how is information generated and consumed and exchanged between different stakeholders so that you have a good idea of when and where to expect things. One of the biggest comments we've heard bring this together is that people need to understand that the workflows are going to be different, that it's going to be a different way of generating and using information. It's not just a matter of we produce X drawings every week and that's how it goes, that there's a different workflow. And so this kind of leads into how to extend that. Approaches to take when sharing information, how to put these goals into a BIM plan, And then finally, what are some of the things to expect when you're actually executing a project from the information point of view? So really, the purpose of the project is, or the purpose of the volume, the project volume, is to how your goals and capabilities, how your processes, and how the tools that you use all work together for generating outcome. That it's not just a matter of, well, as long as you have the goals, we get success, or as long as we have the right tools, we get success. How these things all work together, and if you remove any one of them, you're making things more difficult for yourselves. You really have to bridge the three of them, and that's where you generate success. Sort of put together a different way is, if you really want to work, you need to plan, you need to prepare, and if you do that, then you'll have success. A lot of the feedback that we got during this process is that from a practical point of view, the people found that when BIM didn't work or when they had challenges, it was they didn't take the time up front to communicate goals, to communicate the processes, and they didn't actually have agreements on what was going to be done, and that was where things caused issues. So lots of people are going to be involved in any given project. There's going to be owners, fabricators, detailers, everybody you can expect is going to be working on these projects. So it's about how do these disciplines and perspectives come together, how do they use BIM to communicate and make their lives easier as opposed to making their lives difficult. Again, going to give an illustration just of one small part of the volume 3 on how some of these things come together and what it goes through. And this is process support elements. So once you've agreed what you're going to be doing with BIM, but how do you actually get things together? And one of the reasons for this is that a common failure is the fact that people build models, but those models don't actually support the goals. The models are there because that's what ought to go into a model, but it's not how is the information going to be used, how are we going to go things together. Typically, you don't encounter difficulties until it's too late and you realize, oh, well, we should have done more planning ahead of time. In general, there are two aspects to modeling. There is the process side of modeling. What should be going into the model? Who is going to be putting it together? When are things going to be, set up? What is the quality? And there's technology side of it. Not just, oh, we're going to be using Revit, or we're going to be using Bentley, we're going to be using this version. But technical on the, how are people going to be notified if there are changes? How is the model put together? What is the structure going to be like? How are things going to be shared? Is it going to be FTP? Is there going to be a SharePoint server? Is there going to be a master BIM server? And then you worry about things like, what is the format? Are we working with native Revit files? Are we working with IFC? But you need to understand and you need to plan out these various elements and understand how these various elements interact with each other. And so this section gives a bit of information, a bit of context for how things work together like that. The process. It also goes through how to build and read and understand a model matrix. Most people now are familiar with CAD standards and understand how those work. Model matrices conceptually are very similar, at least to me. They have a lot of different information, but it's really all about how are we breaking down what's going into the model, when are we going to be using things, when is that information going to be needed, what is the level of development that that information needs to be ready at, and who is going to do it, who is actually generating the information. This is really the guidelines that people who are working collaboratively need so that they understand what are they responsible for, when are they expected to deliver things, who are they expected to deliver information for, and if they are going to be having issues, maybe the information that they need isn't available, who needs to know about it downstream. This is really about capturing the big who, what, and where. And the section doesn't talk about so much of a use this format or use this approach, but it's the here's how you develop all this, here's how you communicate this information. These are the kind of things that this level of detail is important up front so that you can set expectations, so that you can manage expectations, so that you can actually work towards delivery instead of kind of having a very vague target. Nobody likes vague, imprecise targets. You want to know what you're supposed to be delivering. This helps get you there. It also talks a bit about the implications of level of development. Level of development is still a very confusing topic, even for experienced BIM professionals. Most people are familiar with the BIM form approach. It is very well known, but it is still, in a lot of ways, ambiguous about what are the details, what are the actual attributes that are going to be explicit. There is finally some fairly good consensus about what are the expectations in terms of geometric fidelity, but BIM is about more than just geometry. BIM is about the attributes and the information, and really getting into how do you specify that, and how do you break it down, because different disciplines will have different attribution and information that is important to them. It also talks about the cost of data. You can't just say, well, we want everything, because getting information, putting information into models does have a cost. So you have to make sure, does that cost make sense for the project? For some projects it will, for some projects it won't. And so how do you balance that? How do you balance what you're asking for what you're actually going to need? One big piece of advice that is in there, and I'm just going to put a big exclamation point on it, is make sure that when you are doing your when you're in times of rapid design change and rapid, testing, that you keep your LOD low so that there isn't this high cost to making changes, so that you don't lock yourself in decisions early on when you might be better off changing these other. Talking about information exchanges, one of the big keys here is looking at who is going to be the people you're exchanging. Is it two designers are exchanging information, at which point you may have one approach, versus if you are looking at designers exchanging information with constructors, things are going to be different. There you may have the information more goes one way as opposed to back and forth iteratively. Is it the final handover to an owner who wants to use this? The participants behind information exchange will actually change how that works. Marshall McLuhan once said, the medium is the message, and the message is the medium. This is a very simple thing. The participants exchange, affect how things are exchanged. But one thing that doesn't change is that you want to be consistent in, not in exactly how you exchange things, but in the way and the mechanisms and the reason behind the exchange. You're trying to get information to people so they can make decisions and do a job. So you do want consistency in terms of your names and your standards, how things are broken down so they can be reused, and so that everybody is sort of on the same page. Looking at quality assurance and quality control is sort of the final part of that particular chapter, is how to make sure that what you are developing works and continues to be useful, both from a file point of view, just how do you make sure that the files that you're exchanging stay high quality? How do you identify and address errors? And how do you worry about size and sort of the cleanliness of the model? And this can be this is frequently a challenge because oftentimes these issues will be neglected until they start to cause other problems. And then you have to go back to the original author to find out, what was the, originally there. Sometimes that author has moved on to another project because these issues can, be created months before they actually pop up. So how do you make sure that you deal with things like these? How do you deal with the integrity of the model? Is it complete? Are things placed correctly? Does the model actually contain what the LOD and the model element tables say that it should be containing? You want to look for bad or missing relationships. Is the information there? Because if somebody downstream is relying on this model and it doesn't have the information they need, they're going to throw the whole model out. It doesn't matter that it's 98% good. If they can't get the 2% they need, it doesn't have value to them. Size, you have to worry about bloat, how is slowing things down. If you're looking at using these models in the field that may be on older hardware, slower hardware, less memory, having a huge model can really affect the use for things. Make sure the tools are there to support all of this. Are there tools for logging access? Are there tools for making sure things are imported correctly? Are the schedules generated properly? And one of the big things is making sure that you've got the proper filters set up so that you can get the views that you want. So that if you're just interested in the HVAC elements, that the HVAC views actually contain all of the HVAC things that you will need. That is just one element for what's going into that volume. Is really all about using things from the entire process. So this gets it to what is here, what you're probably really here for is hearing about this practice manual. How do you actually get it? As we said, the practice manual, there's 3 volumes: the primer, the company context, and the project context. One of the big questions that I expect people to be having is, do I need to buy all 3 volumes? I understand what BIM is. I know BIM. I understand that. Do I really need to buy all 3 volumes? No, you do not. I'm just going to emphatically say right now, it is designed that you can buy the pieces that you need. If you are just starting off and you just want to wrap your head around BIM, or perhaps you have a lot of clients who you think could benefit from BIM, but they're not ready yet to more than scratch the surface, point them at just the primer. Just go there. If you are a company that has been using BIM inside your company for a while, but you're starting to use it more, exchanging things on projects, and you want to be able to share the information, or you want to be able to receive information about the people and do it properly and make sure that you get what you need, you may want to focus just on project context. You may want to buy all 3 volumes together, and for that reason, there are several delivery mechanisms to suit what you needed. First off, every single version of the practice manual is available both in English and en français. It is been professionally translated, and then the translations have been reviewed by Francophone practitioners to make sure that it actually works, and it's not just a Google Translate translation, or it's not somebody who's not familiar with the industry translation. Everything has been put together and vetted in both official languages. All volumes of the practice manual are available both digital and printed, so that you can have a print copy for your desk if you want, or it's available as a digital copy. There are 2 streams, and this is sort of the one place where it changes. Do I have to buy everything? There is a stream geared at the practitioner level. This is available in color. Things are, you can buy it either individual volumes, sort of a la carte, or you can buy a collected set of 3 volumes together. There is also an educational edition that is designed for college, university, and also professional development if you're just looking at it this way. The educational version is only available in black and white. It is only available as the 3 volumes collected together, and it is watermarked as an educational edition, but there is both a French and English educational edition. So you decide what you need, and then you go ahead and figure it out. So how do you get it? As of today, both the digital and the print editions are available. If you go to www.buildingsmartcanada.ca, you will find the order button right there, and you will be able to get it. There is secure online ordering for both print and digital that you'll be able to buy online, figure out what you want and buy it. And the other thing that I want to say is that there is a special limited time promo code for viewers of the webcast to get the special launch pricing. All caps, intro, 40, and %sign. So if you are watching this now, you'll be able to get this introduction promo code. This is only going to be available for about a month. So make sure that you use it now. If you do want to share that promo code for the time being with your colleagues, by all means, feel free to. But that's up to you. So this isn't going to be a widely publicized code. So right now, sort of for the first month or so, intro 40%. You can go out there today and order the practice manual if you want. So just a couple of quick key takeaways from today. Volume 1 is really about the what, who, and the why of BIM. Volume 2 is about your internal organizational business implications of BIM. Volume 3 is really about collaborative use of BIM. And the guide is really geared towards both the company and the project. It's by Canadians, for Canadians, and it's still aligned with the international practices and best recommendations. So if you do have any other questions and you want to contact either John and I, please drop us an email. You can also ask some of the more technical questions in terms of the obtaining the practice manual to, I believe there's an info at Building Smart off of the website and things there. Otherwise, I think we've got a few minutes that we can take any questions if you have on today's presentation. So I will hand it back to Eric, and I thank you for your participation in today's webinar.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you, John. So are there any questions? A couple of housekeeping items. We will be sending a follow-up email with the link to the PowerPoint, the link to the webcast, the recordings, and of course a link to the purchase page. We have questions around, does the practitioner version and the student version go to the same level of detail? They are the same version, both educational. It's just the format, black and white versus color. So it's the same content, just different format. Yes, we do have to revise a couple of things. In terms of the pricing is found on our website. The official pricing is found on our website. I'll direct you there. That seems to be it. Thank you, everybody, for attending. Paul and John, thank you again. Again, don't hesitate to become a member of Building Smart Canada. It's free, and sign up for our newsletter. And to our members, our next members community meeting will be at the end of October. So thank you to everybody, and have a great rest of the day.
Thank you, Eric. Have a good one.